Sign the statement, Ren. Just say you were the one driving the forklift. That was my plant manager, standing in the break room at 7 in the morning with the door closed, arms crossed, voice like he was asking me to fill out a timesheet. I stared at him. My hands were still shaking from the night before. I wasn't driving it, I said. You know I wasn't. He looked at me the way men like him always look at women like me, like I'd said something inconvenient. You were on shift. Your badge scanned the bay door at 10:42. On paper, you were the closest employee to the loading dock when it happened. On paper, I repeated, not in reality. He set a folder on the table between us. Inside was a printed incident report with a blank line at the bottom. My name was already typed underneath it. The company's liability exposure is significant, he said. Someone has to sign. You're 28, no dependents, no mortgage. Todd has 3 kids and 15 years with us. Think about what you're doing. I thought about what I was doing for exactly 4 seconds. Then I picked up my coffee, walked out of that break room, and spent the rest of my shift wondering how bad things were actually going to get. Pretty bad it turned out. Worse than I'd imagined. Let me back up. I'd worked at Kellner Industrial Supply for 3 years at that point. It's a mid-sized distribution warehouse outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place that smells like hydraulic fluid and burnt coffee, and where everyone knows everyone's business before it even becomes business. I started as an inventory specialist and worked my way into a logistics coordinator role. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it. I kept tight records. I flagged errors before they became problems. My supervisor, a woman named Patrice, told me twice in writing that I was the most detail-oriented person on her team. Todd was a floor supervisor, 10 years older than me, stocky, loud in the way that reads as confidence until you've worked next to it long enough. He was well liked. He organized the holiday potluck every year, remembered everyone's kids' names, brought donuts on Fridays. Management loved him. He'd been there since before the current plant manager, a man named Carl, had even been promoted into the role. The incident happened on a Tuesday in March. A third-party contractor had come in after hours to move a pallet of heavy industrial shelving units from the receiving dock to the storage bay. Standard stuff, except someone, and the investigation would later confirm it was Todd, had operated a company forklift without authorization while intoxicated, miscalculated the clearance, and brought down an entire shelving unit onto a contractor's vehicle. Nobody was physically hurt, thank God. But the damage to the vehicle was $17,000, and the contractor was threatening to sue the company plus file a complaint with OSHA. The forklift had an operator log. Every machine in the facility did. It was a requirement after a near-miss incident 2 years prior. The log recorded badge scans for authorization, time-stamped entries, and it also had a small onboard camera, a feature that had been added quietly as part of an equipment upgrade the previous fall. Most of the floor staff didn't know about the camera. I only knew because I'd been part of the logistics meeting when the new equipment specs came through. I'd filed the paperwork myself. Todd apparently did not know. Neither did Carl. I didn't say anything about the camera that morning in the break room. I was scared, honestly. Carl was calm in the way that felt like a warning. The way someone is calm when they've already decided something and they're just waiting for you to catch up. He'd been with the company for 20 years. He had relationships with the VP of operations, with HR, with everyone who mattered. I was a coordinator. I had 3 years and a good performance record. When I walked out of that break room, I called my mother from the parking lot. She listened to the whole thing and then said, "Honey, you need to document everything from this moment forward. Every conversation, every email, every word." My mother is not a lawyer. She's a retired middle school vice principal from Dayton, but she has spent 40 years watching people cover things up, and she knows the first rule: if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing before I even got back inside. Over the next 3 days, the pressure escalated in ways I hadn't anticipated. Carl pulled me into his office again on Wednesday. This time, HR was in the room. A woman named Sylvia, who I'd only ever interacted with over email about benefits enrollment. She had a notepad and didn't make eye contact. Carl said the company wanted to resolve the situation quickly and quietly. He said the contractor had agreed to a settlement in principle, but the settlement required a named employee to be cited in the incident report for internal disciplinary purposes, he said. And I remembered his word for word because I typed it into my phone the moment I left the building. We're not asking you to lie. We're asking you to take responsibility for an ambiguous situation in a way that protects the team. I said it wasn't ambiguous to me. I was in the break room eating a sandwich when it happened. 3 people saw me there. Sylvia wrote something on her notepad. Carl said, those employees have been with the company a combined 41 years, Ren. They might not remember the details the way you do. That was when I understood what was actually happening. It wasn't just that they wanted me to sign something. They were telling me that my witnesses could be made to disappear. That memory was a flexible thing when careers were on the line. I went home that night and sat on my kitchen floor for a while, not dramatically, just because sometimes you need to be close to the ground when things feel like they're collapsing. I called my friend Simone, who works in employment law in Atlanta. She wasn't licensed in Ohio and couldn't formally advise me, but she told me enough. She said, don't sign anything, don't agree to anything verbally, and find out whether there is any physical evidence that corroborates your actual location. I knew there was. The break room had a keycard reader. My badge had scanned in at 10:31 p.m. and scanned out at 11:04. The incident was logged at 10:49. I also knew about the forklift camera. I didn't tell Simone about that yet. I wanted to understand what was on it before I said anything to anyone. Thursday morning, I came in early. The warehouse floor was quiet. I went to the equipment station under the pretense of pulling a maintenance log, something I did regularly as part of my job. I pulled up the forklift's onboard system on the docking terminal. The camera footage was stored locally on the machine and mirrored to the facility's internal server, archived automatically every 72 hours. The timestamp I needed was still there. I watched 43 seconds of footage on a 4-inch screen in a cold warehouse at 6 in the morning. It was grainy. It was enough. You could see the operator's face clearly when he turned to check his clearance. You could see the badge clipped to his jacket. You could see, if you knew what you were looking at, the particular way he moved that wasn't the movement of a sober person doing a practice task. It was Todd. I didn't touch the footage. I didn't copy it, didn't download it, didn't do anything except close the terminal and walk back to my desk. My hands were completely steady, which surprised me. I think I'd already decided something, even if I hadn't put words to it yet. By Friday, the situation had moved faster than I expected. Carl called me in again, and this time the tone had changed. He wasn't calm anymore. Or rather, the calm had a different quality to it. Tighter. He said the contractor's attorney had sent a formal letter. He said the company's insurance carrier was now involved. He said if I didn't sign the incident report by end of business Monday, he would have no choice but to put me on administrative leave pending an investigation into my role in the incident. I said I didn't have a role in the incident. He said, that's not how it's going to look. I asked him what that meant. He said, you were on shift. Your badge scanned the bay door. You had access to the forklift. In the absence of clear documentation proving otherwise, the investigation will follow the evidence that exists. There's other evidence, I said. He looked at me. What evidence? I picked up my bag. I'll let you know on Monday. I spent the weekend doing 2 things. First, I called an employment attorney in Columbus, a woman named Patricia, found through a referral from Simone, and had a 90-minute phone consultation on Saturday morning. She confirmed what I suspected. If the company moved to formally blame me for the incident, I could face termination for cause, which would affect unemployment eligibility. And depending on how the contractor's lawsuit proceeded, I could be named personally in civil litigation. The risk was real. Second, I submitted a formal written request to the company's IT department, copying Carl and copying the company's general counsel email address I found in the employee handbook, requesting preservation of all digital records from the facility's equipment systems for the 72-hour period surrounding the incident date. I cited the model number of the forklift. I cited the server mirror protocol. I was polite. I was specific. I copied everyone I could think of. My attorney had told me once you put them on notice in writing that evidence exists, they can't destroy it without significant legal exposure. I hit send at 11:47 p.m. on Saturday. By Sunday morning, Carl had texted me personally, not through the company system, from his cell phone, saying we should talk before Monday. I forwarded the text to my attorney and didn't respond. Monday came. I arrived at 8. Carl was already in his office with the door closed. Celia from HR was in the conference room with someone I didn't recognize. A man in a dark blazer who I later learned was outside legal counsel the company had brought in over the weekend. They called me in at 9. Outside counsel opened. He was smooth, practiced, the kind of person who makes unreasonable things sound procedural. He said the company had reviewed my preservation request and was cooperating fully with standard documentation protocols. He said the company valued my contributions. He said there had been miscommunications in previous conversations that he wanted to address directly. Carl sat to his left and looked at the table. Outside counsel said they had reviewed the equipment records in question. He said the forklift's onboard camera had captured footage of the incident that the company was now obligated to preserve and potentially disclose. He said that footage, combined with the breakroom keycard records I had referenced in my preservation request, created a complex evidentiary picture that the company needed time to assess. He asked me very professionally to take 2 days of paid administrative leave while they completed their internal review. I looked at Sylvia. She was looking at the notepad again. I said I would take the administrative leave. I said I expected written confirmation of my employment status and the reason for the leave within the hour. I said I was retaining an attorney and all further communication should be directed to her. Outside counsel nodded like this was a completely reasonable development. Carl still hadn't looked up from the table. I cleaned out what I needed from my desk, said goodbye to the 3 people on my team who were already at their stations, and drove home. I got a coffee from the drive-thru on Route 40 and sat in my car in the parking lot drinking it because I didn't want to go inside and be alone with the adrenaline just yet. The sky was that particular gray that Ohio does in March, flat and featureless, and the radio was playing something I didn't recognize. My phone buzzed. It was my attorney. She said outside counsel had called her directly, which meant the company had decided to move quickly. She said it was a good sign. She said keep your head down, don't post anything, don't talk to coworkers. 11 days later, I got a call from my attorney just after lunch. She said the company had completed its internal review. She said the footage from the forklift camera, combined with the keycard records from the break room, unambiguously placed me away from the loading dock at the time of the incident. She said the footage also clearly identified the actual operator. She said Todd had been placed on administrative leave pending termination proceedings, and that Carl, for his role in what outside counsel had apparently characterized internally as a misdirected accountability process, had been formally reprimanded and stripped of his disciplinary authority pending an HR investigation. She said the company wanted to settle with me directly. Reinstatement, back pay for the leave period, a written apology in my personnel file, and the confidential settlement that she advised me not to discuss publicly. I asked about the contractor's lawsuit. She said the company was now cooperating with the contractor's attorney and had identified the correct employee in the incident report. I asked about OSHA. She said that was ongoing and outside the scope of my settlement, but that my documented preservation request had been noted favorably by the investigator as evidence of my good faith. I sat with all of that for a moment. Then I asked her what would have happened if I'd signed that paper in the break room. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, honestly, they probably would have made it stick. The footage existed, but if you'd signed the report, it would have been very hard to unwind. They were counting on you not knowing it was there. They forgot one thing. I was the one who filed the paperwork when they installed it. I went back to work 3 weeks after the incident. Most people didn't know the details. The settlement had a confidentiality component. But the floor staff are observant, and they knew that Todd was gone, and they knew that I had come back, and people can generally read the shape of a situation even when they don't have all the words for it. Patrice stopped by my desk on my first day back. She didn't say much. She just set a coffee on my desk, the good kind from the place down the street, not the break room machine. She looked at me for a second and then said, "I'm glad you're back." That meant more than most things, honestly. Carl was still there in a reduced capacity. We didn't interact much. When we did, he was formal in the way people are when they're very aware of the space between themselves and a consequence. I wasn't warm to him, but I wasn't hostile. I had what I needed. I didn't need anything else from him. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from having to fight for something that should have been obvious. Not the tiredness of hard work, which feels like something spent toward a purpose. This is different. It's the exhaustion of having to prove a thing that you already know, of building a case for your own basic honesty, because the people around you decided their convenience was worth more than the truth. It takes something from you that doesn't fully come back. But here's the thing I come back to. Months later, when I'm going through those days in my head, my mother told me to document everything. Not a lawyer, not a professional advisor. My mother, who spent 4 decades watching people in positions of authority decide that the truth was negotiable. She knew what to say because she'd seen it enough times to recognize it the moment I described it over the phone. And I listened. I'm still at Kellner for now. I've started talking to a few people about other opportunities. Not because I'm running from something, but because I've learned something useful about myself in the last year. I do not fold. I did not fold when Carl put that folder on the table. I did not fold when Sylvia wrote on her notepad and wouldn't meet my eyes. I did not fold when the text came in on Sunday night from a man who thought he could manage me the way he'd managed things for 20 years. I have a very specific memory of the break room that Tuesday morning, the folder on the table, the blank signature line, my name already typed underneath it, neat and certain, like it was already done. I remember thinking, someone has decided that my name belongs there. And I remember the exact moment I decided they were wrong. That part didn't take long at all. I've thought a lot about what Carl was counting on that morning in the break room. He wasn't counting on me having evidence. He wasn't even counting on me fighting back. He was counting on something simpler than that. He was counting on me being the kind of person who, when handed a folder with her name already typed on the line, would pick up the pen because the room felt too heavy not to. That's not cruelty exactly. It's a calculation. People in positions like Carl's make it all the time. They look at someone and measure the gap between what that person knows and what that person is willing to do with what they know. He'd seen that gap close in his favor before. It had probably closed in his favor dozens of times, with dozens of people. Over 20 years of managing a floor where everyone was a little afraid of losing what they had. What he didn't account for was that I'd filed the paperwork on the forklift camera myself. That's the part that still gets me when I turn it over. Not that I outsmarted anyone. I didn't, really. I just happened to be the person who processed a routine equipment upgrade 8 months before any of this happened. I did my job carefully, the way I always did. I kept records. I paid attention to details that most people let slide because details are tedious and nobody ever thinks the tedious thing will matter until it's the only thing that does. There's a line I keep coming back to. You build the life you're going to need before you know you're going to need it. I didn't document carefully because I was preparing for a fight. I documented carefully because that's what doing good work looks like on an ordinary Tuesday. And then an extraordinary Tuesday came, and all those ordinary habits were the only thing standing between me and a career-ending lie with my name on it. Todd made a choice that night. He made it while impaired, in a facility where he had authority and access and 15 years of goodwill behind him. When it went wrong, he let the people around him make another choice, to redirect the damage towards someone with less protection. That chain of choices had a direction. Every link in it pointed the same way, toward the path of least resistance, which happened to run straight through me. But choices have weight. They accumulate. Carl didn't lose his title because I was clever or because I had a good attorney, though both of those things helped. He lost it because he had spent 20 years believing that the truth was something you could manage, and one Saturday night I put a preservation request in writing and CC'd the general counsel, and suddenly the truth had a timestamp and a server address, and it wasn't manageable anymore. That's the thing about integrity that nobody really tells you when you're young. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up quietly in the records you kept when nobody was watching, in the habits you built when there was no particular reason to build them carefully. Patrice set a coffee on my desk the morning I came back and didn't say much, and I understood that she'd seen enough to know how it had gone. That mattered to me more than most of the formal outcomes. I don't think I'm exceptional. I think I got lucky in specific ways. Lucky that the camera existed. Lucky that I knew about it. Lucky that Simone answered her phone on a Wednesday night. But I also made choices. I walked out of the break room without signing. I called my mother. I opened the notes app before I even got back inside. Small choices made fast when the room was still heavy and my hands were still shaking. Those choices were mine. Nobody made them for me. And they were the only thing in the end that Carl never had any power over at all.